This is a presentation of MANBREED. MANBREED. MANBREED.
Hello and welcome to MANBREED Live. My name is Michael Diallo McClendon. This is where we believe that to understand a man is to acknowledge all men. We've got a very special show today. But before we talk about the queen who is joining us for this conversation, let me toss it to the street therapist himself, Mr. Orlando Boyd. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm here. Glad to be here on another edition of MANBREED Live. And I know this is one that has been in the making for a while, you know, talking about this topic. And but listen, let's not waste any more time. Let's introduce the man himself, the legend, the myth, the one who has, as we say, right, the prescription with his lips. He is the Dr. Thurman. Well, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good today, guys. I'm excited about our topic too. We have a lovely guest. She's very insightful, has a lot of experience and knowledge to bring to this conversation. So I'm definitely excited about it. You know, it's one that has been a touchy subject when we talk about men. You know, one of the reasons why our street therapists had this initiative about the man breed in the first place. So without further ado, I'm gonna kick it back to you, Mike McClendon, Diallo, and let's get started.
Well, we're talking about lust and faithfulness, and in order to really talk about this topic, we wanted to bring in a young lady who is quite an exceptional and insightful author who is a founder of her own podcast. But let me kind of give you some insight on who she is. She's been declared as being sweet, yet bold as a lioness. That's right. Kimberly Brownie Vaughn delivers power-packed messages to hit the bull's eye of a woman's heart. Now, she is the CEO and founder of You Are Singled Out, which specializes in moving women from chaos to confidence before Mr. Right. She's also a wonderful author. She has many books. Her latest book, though, is entitled Confidence Before Commitment, and upon its debut was ranked the number one release on Amazon. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome none other than the one and only Kimberly Brownie Vaughn. How you doing, Kimberly?
Oh, wonderful. I'm excited to be here with you kings. Come on, royalty.
She said, bring
in
it.
the building. Yes.
I'm telling you. Mike,
I'm
remind me
honored to
that.
be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Mike, I gotta pay you to give me intros like that, Mike.
I know, right?
Well, you know,
Look at the stage, you know. He brought it right, didn't he, Orlando?
Man, I'm telling you.
I was telling Dr. Webb before the show that when you were a part of the duo Descendants of the Reality, I was one of y'all's biggest fans, and so I miss the music and the vibe that you used to share through the music. So we'll talk later about how people can stay in contact with you, but the music is just one side, but the music is definitely a phenomenal side of what you do. So it's an honor to have you on the show, Brownie.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, we're talking about lust and faithfulness, and that's one of Orlando's topics that, you know, he comes up with these very somewhat controversial topics, but we always have Doc in the, you know, who can kind of keep us in there and make it functional, yeah, because it gets real deep sometimes. And Orlando is great at coming up with these provocative topics. So, but let's dig right in. Let's talk about why do people cheat? And I want to start out talking to Doc on this one because I'm sure he's counseled quite a few people who are in such predicaments where people are being unfaithful.
Yeah, you know, when we're talking about cheating, it can be very complex because there are a lot of variables that informs people's decision to behave that way. And again, we have to remember that all behavior is a decision. All right. And so with that being said, I guess the theme or the umbrella under which we could cast cheating would be, in a simplistic way, a deficiency somewhere inside of self. Now, that is not an absolute statement. It's just from the vast majority of my experiences and conversations, is boiling down to a deficiency in self. Very rarely have I encountered an individual or talked with an individual who set out to just wreak havoc in their partner's life. They said, hey, you know what? I'm going to cheat on her because I know it's going to hurt her, or I'm going to cheat on him because I know it's going to devastate him, yada, yada, yada. Very rarely do I hear individuals say that. That's not to say that the outcome of what I just described does not happen, but they don't set out to do that. Generally, it's more self-centered and only focused on self-gratification or some sort of falsehood regarding self-fulfillment that leads to the behavior that creates the destructive outcome. And so, as we can talk about some of the branches on that tree, but inevitably that tree is, standing, and we call that tree some sort of deficiency or lack thereof or feeling of lack thereof that leads one to start exploring what those lustful branches look like.
Yeah, that's a very good analysis, because it seems like, one of those branches you talked about being self-centered, and the title of our show is Lust and Faithfulness. So Orlando, kind of keying in with you here, what role do you see lust playing in people cheating? Because it seems like it can be one of the major driving forces, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Well, it typically is one of the driving forces, to be honest with you, especially for men. I'm coming from the man perspective, because typically men see, they like, and they want. And usually lust is kind of rooted in that it comes from that desire, usually physically, as Doc said, there's usually a void in there. And a lot of guys who get into relationships, they may get into relationships before they even know what they really want or what they feel like they need per se. And a lot of times in that lust thing, which is kind of like seeing something fantasy that you want, seeing something you want as part of your fantasy, and then that becomes a driving desire, and it becomes that thing where it can become insatiable. But in the part of cheating, and that, what I say from the man perspective, it still comes down to a certain level of opportunity as well. So, okay. It like a guy can't just cheat and just be doing it. There's got to be an opportunity to be there as well. And I know I'm getting that a little bit, unpacking that a little bit more and further on down, but that's really one of the fundamentals of it, especially when it comes from the guy standpoint. I mean, they like what they like, and then, like I said, in regards to the relationship, if there's some voids in that relationship, maybe he's not getting what he think it was or what it used to be, and it starts to open up certain other things in his mind, and that's what leads to the cheating, so to say.
So interesting. I mean, because I hear you. I mean, oftentimes, like getting back to what Doc said, he feels like there's a void, and so from the brother's perspective, will go out and do things. Now, Brownie, you're the host of a podcast that's being heard in over 15 countries. You are singled out, and so you talk to a lot of different men as well as ladies about similar topics. So I'm wondering, as it relates to the men and the women, from your perspective, why do people cheat?
Well, I definitely concur with Dr. Webb and Orlando. There's a vast amount of reasons why people actually cross the boundary line, right, in relationships. But some that I've seen that have been really prevalent, like you were talking about deficiencies, lack of validation. That's a huge one, right? Mm-hmm. If you're looking for someone perhaps to complete you or to give you that stamp of approval, and you're not getting it from your boo, your bae, your mate, right. You may literally look for it elsewhere. I think another one that's huge too is sometimes love tanks are just on E. Love tanks. And what I'm really hitting at with that is knowing about your love language. That's a huge thing to know, even as an individual, because sometimes with cheating, it just doesn't even start with the relationship, but even your own self, your individuality. Who are you? Your self-discipline and your knowledge of self. So knowing your love language, and then communicating that, and then, analyzing to see if, am I being loved in this particular way, right? Some people are not being loved in their particular love language, so they look elsewhere for it, for somebody else to be a void filler, right? Mm-hmm. I think another one can be, really, some folks just compare. They compare. We're bombarded. All of us are bombarded from day to day. It can be a pop-up ad, a commercial. It can be a coworker. It can be somebody, a complete stranger, right? Or somebody hitting you up, DMing you on social media. But comparing who you currently are with and committed to compared to, boom, somebody else. And you think the grass is greener on the other side. But the thing about greener grass, it doesn't mean that there's no weeds over there. And it doesn't mean that that grass doesn't require Miracle-Gro or mowing, because it takes work on the other side of the fence as well as where you stand. So that's another thing people get caught up in, comparing, thinking that, oh, what they got is better and easier, right? Two other quick ones, really quick, that I think that a lot of folks struggle with: lack of self-control. There are some people that, as an individual, not even looking at the relationship, but just you as a person, you don't have any self-discipline. You have a hard time saying no, never satisfied with being who you're with, or you're too in love with the chase to really be in love with somebody. Some folks love that. They get an adrenaline rush and a high off of that, more so off the chase versus having someone, And then I think lack of accountability. That's a huge one too. Some people do cheat because there is no one there to check them. No one is there to lay down some repercussions saying, you cross this line, this is going to happen. So some folks think that they can just get away with it, so they cheat. I don't condone that, but yeah.
Right.
That's great. You shared a lot of different reasons why, and one of the things that Dr. Webb, that she mentioned, was social media, which kind of opens the door to all of these perceived yards where there's all this greener grass, not just social media. But I'm just wondering, in the midst of all that, everybody doesn't come to a relationship, like you said earlier, saying, I'm going to hurt somebody, right? So when they're in this relationship and it hadn't happened, I mean, like kind of some of the things that Brownie said, but like what causes these relationships to go left when on their wedding day, it seems like everybody's so like, I found the right one.
Yeah. Hey, I say all the time that your wedding day is just the registration for the class. That's it. Right. And so everything that happens after registration is actually the lesson or the curriculum that you're going through. This whole curriculum and this whole idea is built on how do you build a functional definition for commitment? And you'd be surprised how many individuals have not committed to anything in their life other than a tattoo, right? So they don't have a functional definition of what commitment looks like, which means they spent their entire life cheating on themselves. So if they've been cheating on themselves, why wouldn't you expect them to cheat on you? Now, the byproduct of being self-centered means that while I do not necessarily set out to hurt you directly, the whole point of me being self-centered means I never take you into consideration to begin with. So it is the absence of the thought of anything outside of me that allows me to say that, no, I didn't intentionally set out to do you that way. However, in the same sentence with the diunital principle in place, I set out to do the exact thing that I didn't set out to do, right? So it becomes this kind of like this paradox. And so, much like Brownie was saying, then we start to exist in a space of social ideals. And those social ideals are constantly being challenged because we are juxtaposing them against what we think we should have, which is really entitlement, right? And as opposed to just owning who we are and trying to work on that, which means like I can make someone laugh, I can make someone smile, but I cannot make someone happy. That is their decision, right? So then I only focus on the things that I can control, which is my happiness. But that is a commitment to self first. All right. So then if I've never done that, then I start to build these lustful ideas. And it's just it's like a new car, Orlando. All right. If I get the 2000 Benz or the 2020 Benz and I want, the 2021 come out, they going to call me.
Yep.
They going to say, yo, hey, we got the 2021. You can get in it, no money down. And I'm gonna take a look at that. Unless I could care less about what anybody else thinks. I'm very happy with my 2000 because it has everything that I want in it. It doesn't matter what comes out the year after, right? Because I keep up my car and it runs just like a new car. But I'm committed to that because I know what I like, as opposed to what's hot right now.
That's good. That's good. Go ahead, Brownie. You wanted to jump in?
Yeah, you said something at the very top, Dr. Webb, that was really pertinent. Looking at people's relationship resumes. So even before the I do, way before that, look and see, the person that you're interested in, have they been committed to anything in their lives? Now, it may be a romantic attraction relationship, but it could be family. It could be a career. Just like, for instance, if you're interested in a job, you give them a resume and they look and see, what does your job history look like? Does it look like you have been all over the map? You have no sense of commitment, stick-to-itiveness, none of that? If not, that may be a telltale sign that you are not necessarily going to be here for too long, right?
Right.
You get a taste and a tease of something and move on. So I think it's important to really look at somebody even well before the I do in marriage and even talking about marriage. Let me get to know more about this person and actually see, are you dedicated?
Right.
And something beyond just serving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That too, something where you're not necessarily getting an ROI, but you're there to serve someone else, to help them out, right? Yeah. That's huge. That was a good point. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know a lot of times, we can say the right thing, but be doing something totally different, and so like getting to know a person and getting to know that spouse is totally different after, I guess, you signed that registration paper. Orlando, getting back to like lust and faithfulness, and let's say this couple has gotten together, like, and this temptation is starting. I mean, talk about like how it begins. I mean, in terms of, let's say, somebody, and I think I'm hearing it begins before with lack of commitment, but like in a real time, like, how does one grapple, or how would you suggest one can kind of identify when that's starting to happen, when one is being pulled away because of lust from their spouse?
Well, that's a lot. You asked a lot in that question.
I know, that's a lot.
So I'm just going to streamline, and then we'll come back to some other parts of that. Okay. But one of the things I do want to address with lust in of itself, because sometimes people who don't really know love can mistake lust for that, because lust is a counterfeit part of love. And those people who, are the old saying about hurt people, some people don't know how to really love. And so when they come into that and they seeing that what they like physically, or that's the way they have been programmed, that becomes their language of love is, hey, I need to do this physically, or my desires and things like that. So that is one thing to address, and for some people, and why they cheat, because they don't know how to really love. But let's start back what you said about how it begins. And we had this subject right here on MANBREED Live about settling versus waiting. And for those people who seem to settle, we already know that they're already kind of have some voids there for what they think that what they want in their relationship, or their perfect person. So you start getting into a relationship where you may have settled, quote unquote settled. That means that there was certain other things that the other person, the person that you are in a relationship with, didn't have as your perfect ideal. And typically in relationships, and I said this a lot of times, for especially in the case with men will start to, kind of swaying away if they were attracted certain physical ways to a certain girl. So let's say he was always attracted to the light-skinned women, but his woman he settled with was dark-skinned. So it's always going to be a certain level that when he sees light-skinned women, he's going to be kind of having a certain level of attraction to them. And then as I keep going back to that part of opportunity, because if he's in constant contact with that light-skinned person that works around him, or he can see it every day at after work or something like that at the store, that presents certain opportunities, and then one thing can lead to another. So it can begin small. Can, like I say, you talk about social media, it can begin with just that figment of fantasy and wanting something like, oh man, I would love to have that, or I want to try that out. But it still kind of starts in a way where a person who is already maybe filled with, I like to say, a person who's full don't want to eat anything else. If there's certain things that are having lack into his relationship, he's going to explore that. And if there's opportunity he's going to start to go down that road. And so it usually begins with those opportunities or erosions in relationships, things that might have changed, meaning that it might have started off one way, and then, where there start to be some lack in that, it start opening up those opportunities. So all those things play a factor to how it can begin.
And let me say this, like, more often than not, once an individual is engaged in a lustful relationship, keep in mind, lust is your ideology cheating on love, right? So you're already in a relationship that's trying to be something that's not. Mm-hmm. All right, and the problem that presents itself in that situation, like Brownie mentioned earlier, is self-control. If you don't have any self-control, you doomed. Because and for men, I'm speaking from my experience, a lot of men that I talk to, they end up in a situation because they think that the cheating happened later than it actually did. So they say, well, I didn't cheat, or I haven't cheated yet. But cheating happens the minute that you feel the need to not be so free about the communication or the interaction. That's the minute it starts. Now, it's not explicit, or it's not as intense, but the minute that you feel this need to start covering it up is the minute that you opened up the mind for negotiation. Mm-hmm. And you got to be honest about that. Now, I live my life not judging anybody. You do what you think works for you. You ask me based on what works for me, I'm going to tell you. However, the problem is when you start thinking out of alignment, then you start creating contradictions, and then those things have huge ramifications. But cheating, for most men that I've talked to, they don't realize that the cheating started long before the act that they have deemed as cheating.
So let's talk about what cheating is then, because, like for some people, they think, well, I had sex with somebody that's not my partner. That is cheating. But it sounds like you're saying, oh, no, it starts a long way before that. It's a lot more to it than that. Anybody want to chime in? I'm saying different people, but Brownie, you want to chime in on that?
I do. You all were giving a lot from the male point of view, and I definitely respect that. Let me flip it on the female point of view. A lot of times how cheating occurs and begins, I think, a lot of times it's not being present. When a man is not present there, there's a mad void that's there. Let me tell you one thing about us as women. I don't care how alpha female she may be or omega female she may be, right? We all have this deep desire and innate need to be covered, And when that covering is no longer there, so whether that is, yes, a boyfriend, whether it's a father, whether it's a husband, whether it's a big brother, when that covering is not there, then that literally leaves us in a vulnerable space. I'm not saying totally weak as if, we don't have our own mouths and minds, not at all, and intelligence and discernment. But it leaves us in a place where, hey, I thought you were committed to me. You've left me open here. You haven't been present emotionally. You haven't been present physically. You haven't been present in a way where I get to share my secrets with you. I'm talking about insecurities or sharing my accomplishments, celebrations, what have you. And here goes another guy who's giving it to me, complimenting me on my looks, and giving me time to talk and to really, us as women, we love to talk, right? Communication is key. A man who's listening to us Yeah. Next thing you know, our hearts start to open.
Right.
And our legs can start opening, right? It's one thing after another. I definitely agree with that. It's a seed before it becomes a plant. It starts off small, and sometimes it's so minuscule, you may not even see it. It may be so microscopic, and just a little bit, but that door keeps creaking open. Next thing you know, whoa, this is full throttle.
Yeah.
Like, your foot is on the gas, and it's like, how can I stop this? This affair, this entanglement, as we've been.
Don't start, Brownie. We're not using that language around here.
Oh my goodness, ain't that a mess? Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you,
look,
one of my greatest mentors, she's a female, and she told me, she said, everybody either got somebody else or they looking. You just got to make sure that when they look, it don't add up. Now, she an OG, and that's why I love her so much, right? But that's the truth. She said when they go looking, they should be able to look at this equation and figure that ain't worth the trouble. It don't add up, right? Which means like we are constantly, like, there's a human aspect to this whole idea. We are humans trying to have a spiritual experience, right? Whether, whatever you deem that higher than you, have at it. But at the end of the day, you have to be in control. The whole thing is like, you have to master control. And you'd be surprised, like, once you're able to master that, how many things you're able to move off the table. Because if you're negotiating based on what's in between your legs for both male and female, then that means you've already begun the process of selling yourself short, both figuratively and literally, right? Because everything of value should come from the top down. So the idea of cheating is, again, it is a lack of deficiencies in some areas. Now, like Brownie said, like, there are things that are necessarily missing, and people gonna do what they want to do, even if they have to lie to do it. Because at the end of the day, like, everybody wants to feed themselves, whatever. But the problem is not in feeding yourself. The problem is what type of appetite do you have, right? And so you gotta decide what that looks like.
Talking about those differences, Orlando, let's bring the breeze into this, if you don't mind. But go ahead, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because as Doc alluded to, one of those sayings, and it was a saying that I remember as I was growing in maturity, is about that, especially when it comes to men will be able to draw their appetite up in many different areas so long, but for the woman, you gotta make sure he comes home to eat. And we're surrounded by these types of things, and we talk about like what defines the word cheating, and it's almost like that. What is a cheat? Like to get an advantage, or especially in the sports realm, right? So we already know that men and women are probably going to have an influx of these temptations. It is they act on it, which makes it into what we call cheat, because there's going to be certain things. But I always say this though, and kind of going to along the lines of people, and I'm not talking about men, period, but if I want to speak to men, that I think that there are those men who has disposition to be with one person. I think there's a disposition for some people to be alone, but I think there's a disposition for people who just need multiple people. I don't care what it is in their relationship, they just have to have that. It's just those types of things. But even those people who just say, with being with one person, as we've been talking about in this episode, is that it can still start with having a different voids. But like I said, on the front end, though, if the compatibility was already kind of shaky from the beginning, is going to open up that somewhere down the line, they're going to be looking at, okay, what else is out there? Or let me go after what I'm missing. But one of the points that got to be really addressed is that when we talk about cheating, that it is still a point of that the person is grappling with what I am doing. It is kind of satisfying one area, but I don't want to give up what I have, because if it was something in that other relationship or that other person that was valued more than what I have, it wouldn't be cheating. It would be like, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. I'm leaving the relationship. I'm out. But those who just going after that little small void, they just want to sample that and then come back home. and that which is constituted cheating, or I've been weak in that moment, and I had to go out and explore it, and if they get caught, they get caught. If they don't,
and that's a great point, because like the cheating is not the actual action. Mm-hmm. The cheating is the fact that you didn't provide the information for the other person to make a sound decision for themselves. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can do a lot of things. Like, you can do exactly what Orlando said, but you go back to your partner and you say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is how I want to behave. Then your partner can look at you and say, hey, I need to check out because I don't want to get down like that. Mm-hmm. Right? The cheating happens when I want to do all of that, but I don't express that to my partner. And then all of a sudden, my partner can't make a sound decision for themselves or in their own best interest. And then they find out another way, and then the dominoes start to fall. Because keep in mind, there are circles out there where people have gone back to their partner. They say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. I want to do it this way. Their partner looks at them and they say, I appreciate you sharing the information. Go ahead and do that. But when you do that, don't bring it back to this space this way, and we'll be okay.
Ain't that what happened in the national store that with this entanglement? Ain't that what's perceived? That's what was perceived, right?
Brownie, what you got?
Talk, Brownie. I see you say you had something on your mind.
I really, with that whole fiasco, I don't understand it at all. A lot of people point fingers at Jada. I think there's enough blame to pass around. But if you are married, I think it's very wise, especially as women. Okay, we have this sense of wanting to help, to serve, to nurture, to cultivate, right? Yeah. But in a marriage, part of our duty is also, or even in a relationship, to defend that and to allow another grown man to become a part of the we. And okay, we taking vacations, we sharing a house or whatever, you know what I mean? Too much, it way too close for comfort. Now, Jada, wanting to be his nurse and maybe, a maid in shining armor. Come on,
It's more to the story though. It's more to the story though. Because you can't discount what the young man said as well, even if there wasn't some exaggeration on the point that he said that he sat down with the husband and the husband was like, okay.
But see,
that opens up a low level.
I got a problem with Will as well. How you going to allow another man to come into your union and covenant and you give him?
Because he out there doing it too.
Thank you. That's what I said too.
He out there
doing his thing too. That's true.
The problem that I perceive is that she got caught.
Yeah.
Her person told, is it's supposed to be kissed. Don't kiss and tell. He told.
Exactly. And so now she has to fess up and bring. Yeah.
Absolutely. She got to show face. Yeah.
And I read something the other day. It says that if your partner comes home and they go the entire day without saying anything to you, that means the other relationship is going very well. You know what I mean? So like Will and, both of them, like you said, there's enough blame to go around. There's a lot of dysfunction going on. But the thing that I saw for me, from my perspective, because I try to take the viewpoint less traveled, right, was that there was a cipher of individuals using each other. And that is, in any relationship, when you start using someone else to try to fulfill what you should be doing internally, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Orlando, I was wanting you to bring the breeds into this because, this is MANBREED Live. Yeah. And we're talking about lust and faithfulness. And I would imagine when you start talking about different type of guys, they respond differently. Some may be less susceptible to cheating, period, and just more faithful. Is that true? Or if so, which breeds are more likely to kind of stay the course and not?
My grandmama used to always say that if a dog got teeth, it can bite. So when somebody say my dog don't bite, that's a lie. So every man has the potential to do it, not to say that they will. And it comes down to, as we've been saying before, about opportunity. it would be foolish to think that there's no breed of man that is more quote unquote faithful than the others. But in the makeup, and we talk about backgrounds, as Brownie alluded to, what they've been doing in relationships. I like to call it character credit. That what they based off of way they go into the choice into the person that they get with, that would dictate as far as their likelihood to cheat. I know of a guy that was really, really faithful to his woman, and then he found out that she maybe kind of got into, he never was 100% sure if she did cheat, and then that opened up the door for him. He was a faithful dude, family oriented, everything. He grew up seeing that from his mother and father. But when it happened to him, it triggered something, and he never was the same in that relationship. They eventually, of course, separated. But end of the day, that's how it opened. If he had never known that she had did it, he probably still been faithful if he had just going along with the course. So, but when it comes to a certain thing of for certain men and their disposition, we all say the competitive breeds seem to always have that level of, hey, man, it becomes a status thing of, I do it because I can. I got this person, I got this girl, whatever like that. That's innate for them to kind of have that to their homeboys or whatever, presenting, hey, I can do it because I can. Any other breeds, the creatives, I mean, it just becomes a case of, as we talked about before, when we define this cheating, is just not being communicated. It's just, hey, I'm just doing because that's the way I am. And every along the lines of all the breeds, maybe except for the the conventional breed, which typically some men are just not capable of cheating because they just are too clumsy and would tell on themselves, don't know how to, because that's a part of cheating. Cheating is that you're trying to make sure the other person don't know, but they gonna tell on themselves. So, some guys just can't do that, but it still does not erase the fact that the desire is there, the lust is there. And I think that's something that's inbred in the human species, and the male particularly, because the eye gate seems to be always having intrusive spaces that kind of fosters that.
Let's go. I tell you what, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk some more about lust and faithfulness. You're listening to MANBREED Live, where we believe that to understand a man is to acknowledge all men. Welcome back to MANBREED Live, where we believe that to understand a man is to acknowledge all men. I'm here with the resident brothers, Dr. Thurman Webb, Mr. Orlando Boyd, our street therapist, and our special guest, Brownie, Kimberly Brownie Vaughn, who is the host of a podcast which you can hear in 15 different countries. It's called You Are Singled Out. Brownie, thanks for joining us. Now, we've been talking about lust and faithfulness, and we've really been looking at how it happens, as it relates to unfaithfulness. But I want to kind of switch things up a little bit and talk about, how people stay faithful, how they transcend, I guess, the urge or the act of cheating on their spouse. So let's talk about some keys to that. And as usual, I kind of want to start out with Doc. Doc, what are some keys to staying faithful in the midst of all that temptation that can happen when you're in a committed relationship?
At the top of this thing is communication, right? But it's easier said than done, because the vast majority of people do not know how to communicate. And one of the reasons why they do not know how to communicate, because the language you use to communicate outside of relationships is not the language that you use to communicate inside a relationship. When you are inside a relationship, you and your partner are on a journey to create a new language or dialect that both of you should speak proficiently. And it takes time in order to speak it proficiently, right? And once you start doing that, there are a couple of things you have to do. You have to be honest about what it is that you need. All right? You have to be open-minded about what it is that you need. You have to be mindful not to be critical, but to be constructive, right? And as you become constructive, that should be the means by which you continue to build or scaffold on this language. You should be able to share your experiences together and separately and be totally okay with that, right? Because just because you're in this space together doesn't mean that you stop being an individual. It is the individual that attracted you to one another. Keep your relationship and keep your relationship and your partner a priority. If you do that, then you lessen the opportunities for those small cracks to turn into huge gorges or canyons, so to speak. Always respect yourself and your partner, so much so that you realize that you are not fighting each other, but you are fighting to find a solution. And sometimes those solutions don't necessarily mean that you both have to agree. However, you should be working to be selfless, right? And don't get complacent. Work really hard. The same thing that you use to catch him or her. People say you got to keep doing that. I speak against that. The same thing that you use to catch that person is not the same thing you use to keep that person. So you should be evolving. You should necessarily know more about your partner because they are evolving. And so their interests may change, their taste may change. And you should be in the giving mode because love is about giving, so much so that if their palate changes, then you start to learn to cook with the ingredients that satisfy their palate. Like if you're constantly doing that, then the relationship is constantly evolving to new. Every day is new. And when you encounter obstacles, it is an opportunity for you all to come together to find a solution. Now, all of that said, it's easier said than done. It is totally possible, but it is all about commitment. Are you committed to that? Because that is the marriage. It is not that day. That part is the marriage. So it is doable, but the way this world is set up, that at any opportunity that negative energy has to enter, it will try. It's always knocking at the door. And so, like Orlando said, if I'm feeling like I'm not being satisfied this way, it's not that I'm gonna go unsatisfied. I'm gonna get satisfied one way or another. However, my partner should be dialed in on me enough to know, and I should have enough self-control that when I'm not being satisfied, I don't immediately go out looking for that, but I start to have a conversation, and my partner should be helping me find ways to satisfy myself. I don't mean that in an erotic way, but I mean that in a communicative way to say, hey, babe, this is, I was experiencing you this way. I'd like a little bit more attention this way, not as a child or a codependent, but I'd just like to have your attention so that I can see how you're doing, and vice versa. Mature conversation.
Wow. That's a great list, and what it comes down to, it sounds like it's work. And that's at the basis of a relationship. Some
you gotta work.
That's what Orlando say all the time, man. You gotta put the work in.
You gotta put the work in. Brownie, you want to chime in on that?
I would. Here's the thing though, I'm not married yet. Howsoever, I have definitely been taking notes from a variety of couples, including, my parents, godparents, aunts and uncles, best friends and all. But I once heard this, especially on the woman's point of view. I want to come in on that. But I once heard a man say this, that a man needs, oftentimes in a relationship, especially marriage, 5 parts to a woman. 1 part freak, 1 part mother, 3 part friend. And I want to put an emphasis on the friendship tip, because a lot of marriages that I've been able to see that have matriculated, whether it's 1-year status or 45 years, friendship has been at the heart and soul of it. And really, the men in my life, I know that they could look from here to Timbuktu, and still they know that there would be no place like the home of their wife. right? Because there's focused trust there. And sometimes you do, like you said, you have to look at some things that are uncontrollable, what I call the uncontrollables. You'll get some hollers, some invitations, some temptations, but sometimes you do have to weigh out what I already have. Is it worth sacrificing this, compromising this, to have this quick fling, affair, whatever you want to call it, this one night stand, whatever it is. What am I actually going to sacrifice? And I think also the women in my life, they also know that, hey, all the love, attention, time, effort, energy that I put into this marriage, I'd be foolish to let another guy step to me and me abandon my covering, because I know that I've got security with this man. So I think it's really important as far as when it comes to staying faithful, communication, like Dr. Webb said, yes, and friendship, because I think it's a shame that a lot of folks, they treat their friends better than their spouse.
Yeah.
It's real. They talk, they're more open, more excited to see them, want to hang out, spend quality time with them versus their spouse. So that's something you do have to put the work in. My mom used to say that to me all the time. Marriage is work. The wedding is a celebration. It's one day. And I think a lot of folks, they invest too much in the wedding, dollars, time, effort, and energy versus investing in the marriage, even before saying I do. So you got to be ready, buckled in for work. And every day, like you said, that evolving, yes, because nobody stays the same. Yeah.
Orlando, what say you about how to stay faithful, or keys to staying faithful in marriage?
Keys to staying faithful. Key to stay faithful, man, I tell you, remember your fear, right? Yeah, because a lot of cats don't fear what those repercussions are if they step out there. So staying faithful means, okay, I remember my fear. Like if somebody didn't remember what would it mean to run a red light or rob a bank, they would keep on doing it. So you got to remember that fear, and that fear is one of those things that help keep, and it's like a reverence for the fear of a reverence of who your partner is, you know what I mean? But that in and of itself is like, you know what, I don't want to fear losing that. I don't want to fear hurting her, because we've talked about it before. When the guy stopped caring about that woman's feelings, that opens up the whole thing right there. So he apparently does not care in those feelings in whatever season they're in. That's why he goes out there. But if he's faithful, wants to stay faithful, he'll remember that fear. Another thing is in that faithfulness is stability. I know, like, talked about that a lot as well. Like, some guys, when they go through things in their lives and everything, and having that person that has been, that ride or die, whatever like that, and just having, don't want to mess up any of their own integrity and things like that. That's another reminder for them to say, you know what, I'm going to keep it locked down. I don't need to go. I like the stability. I like what I got. I don't want to lose that. And usually that comes from the other point into it is experience. Sometimes cats, man, they get all that out of their system, beforehand. Right. And when cat, especially guys, I'm coming from the guys' perspective on this, but when dudes usually say, yeah, man, I'm gonna go ahead and settle down, what does that mean? Because that means he done everything. He felt like, man, ain't nothing else out there for me, man. I'm done. I ain't got me my queen, my girl, you know what I'm saying? She may not be perfect, but she's perfect for me. Yeah. And I don't want to go down that road of going through the knucklehead, spending all my money, going through all this drama and all that stuff like that. So that reminder keeps them in like, man, nah, I'm good on that. Even when somebody be like, man, girl, you know what I'm saying? Nah, man, I'm good. Because he's like, you know what? I've been there and done that. And then if you can remember, like I said, things that you had in your life and you don't want to give those up. You got family. You don't want to hurt your little ones. If they ever found out that dad been out dipping, he don't want that character. Now, some dudes don't care, you know what I mean? They don't, but those who really, want to stay faithful, they're at that level of maturity where they do care. They do care what other people think about them. And that's enough to keep them latched on and stay faithful.
Yeah. So you said something really important, man. Even you're right. They do care, Orlando. And I'd take it a step further. Even the ones that lie about it, to some degree, they care too.
Yeah.
Because you, like you said before, you like, man, the one that don't lie about it, he's wreaking havoc.
Exactly.
He don't care.
He don't care.
So,
Yep.
the fact that you feel like you need to hide it or lie about it so that you don't cause the hurt should be enough for you to sit down and rethink that thing, right? Some people are just fearful in being honest. They feel like, they have this social idea, so they can't come home and say, you know what, yeah, we've been married. I ain't feeling that. I know we got 2 kids. I want to walk out. Why? Because society says, yo, that's messed up, and you the dog, this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. But I like to interject this point. I've heard men say it would be easier for them to come out as gay than it would be for them to go home and admit that they've been cheating. Like society would accept them differently if they came home and decided, you know what, I ain't into women no more. I'm into men. Everybody be like, oh, they found themselves. If you come home and you say, you know what, I ain't into this, my wife no more. I'm in love with this person. Then they get vilified. So we have to be mindful of these social constructs and how they play out on how they influence us to want to take an honest step.
Yeah. And one of the things that like old cats would say, and I say old cats, old guys, old men, or whatever like that, sometimes what they define as faithfulness. I remember cats were saying, man, as long as I come home every night, I'm faithful. You know what I mean? What they did when they away from home.
Correct. You know what I mean? As long as I take care of home.
As long as I take care of home, I'm faithful. So that definition of faithful for some, and I think that's kind of becoming now a generational thing. But, in that definition, as we define lust, define faithfulness, because, man, some cats, they just believe that long they ain't doing all stuff. They take care of everything at home. They faithful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to have a brief conversation because I know we're kind of coming to the end of the show, but I want to talk about those couples who have had to deal with that transgression, if you will, for lack of a better term, where someone has succumb, to the lust or whatever caused them to cheat, and now they are trying to work it out, and they both want to work it out. Let's talk about that scenario and what kind of can we put on the table that can be helpful for them as they kind of start that part of their journey to kind of healing in their relationship.
Go ahead, Brownie, you want to tackle that?
You know what? In fact, I'm going to leave, for some solutions, solid solutions, especially if you're talking about marriages, because again, I'm not married, but on the relationship tip, I've definitely been in relationships where I've been cheated on. And I tell you, when it comes to cheating, it just does not bring out the best in either person, the cheatee or the cheater. And so, I can remember a time, I was young and dumb, y'all, for real, falling for a bunch of lies and mess with a bunch of baby mama drama mixed up in there. But I remember specifically, even just when you shot over the questions to me, Diallo, I was like, whoa, I remember getting cheated on and how I had to micromanage everything that he did, checking phones, wondering, and even like being a part-time stalker. I remember going through that and how much not only heartache it was, but work. Just like you're talking about, it's work to invest in a relationship. It's work trying to keep up with somebody who is cheating that you're really wanting to be with. But I will say this for those who are in a relationship, if you have spotted red flags, if you have spotted someone continually disregarding your feelings, your mind, your body, your spirit, and just being straight up a cheater that is just in a habit of it, there's nothing wrong with clipping the ties. I know marriage, that's a whole nother class in itself. But, with my line of work, what I do is more so with relationships is before Mr. Right. So, I would highly suggest and encourage, if you know that somebody is straight up being unfaithful, they're not being dedicated, disrespectful to you, it's all right to let it go. It is, because you're doing yourself a disservice trying to hang on to something that's broken and fragmented. And in the meantime, you're getting split into more pieces versus having peace by yourself and getting in a place of wholeness and then moving on. With somebody who's going to be faithful.
Brownie says she deals with people before Mr. Right. And from what I'm hearing earlier from basically everybody, though, is that habits are developed before the contract. And those habits, a lot of times, play out after you sign the contract, depending on, you know, what you've just been practicing. Have you been a committed person to anything, and what have you been committed to? So, Doc, chime in. I imagine some of the same things apply with marriage in terms of, you know, like we're trying to get back on the same page. This has happened. Either the man or the woman cheated, but they want to work it out. What can you put on the table for them to eat?
You know, when I talk to couples who are trying to come back from the distrust, it almost always boils down to what was the motivator, right? What was the motivator that created the act? And I think when couples take the journey to sift through that uncensored, they have a higher probability of resetting the quote unquote bone of marriage so that the healing can start. And when that, you know, if you've ever had a broken bone, they have a tendency, once you reset them, to be stronger than they were before. But it's all motivated by what was the motivator to create the action. Sometimes people aren't ready to give that up or be completely honest about that. And that would be equivalent to us casting a bone that we have not reset. And so those don't have a probability of turning out very well. But I don't believe in that idea of if a person cheats, then you should leave. I think that is a very immature response to a complex problem. If someone cheats, you shouldn't necessarily have a conversation, whether you have kids or not, whether you're married or not, because that's what mature and grown-ups do. All right, now you're able to set the boundary. That don't mean that you aren't leaving, but you should at least want to sit down and clarify, because if you've been in a relationship, it warrants that. Clarify who it is that's sitting across from you and why this doesn't work for me, and how you, again, that accountability, how you have breached our contract, whether we're married or not. Because our relationship is us saying, hey, we're going to commit to this interaction with each other. And you have breached that in some shape, form, or fashion. But it warrants a conversation. Now, you can leave. That could be your deal breaker in the beginning. Hey, you cheat on me, I'm gone. However, we need to have a conversation, right? Because we know that up front. In a marriage, it can be a bit more difficult because life happens to everyone. And you really don't know what it is that has influenced an individual to take that act. And part of your commitment to that person is the acceptance that they are not perfect. And so the goal is not perfection. The goal is only progress. Right? And so we should all be seeking progress. There are some deal breakers, but there is no universal deal breakers. You decide what the deal breaker is for you. And so that's why I don't subscribe to this blanketed statement that, oh, girl, well, if he cheated, or, yeah, man, if she cheated, man, go to leave, right? Because they don't know the intricacies of the situation that created that outcome. I'm not saying you can't leave, and I'm not saying that it can't be a deal breaker for you. I'm saying, but you have the responsibility to define that for yourself, and not because somebody else told you that's what should happen.
Wow. Well, yeah, I want to add that, especially for guys now. Now, I know, like, you're talking about 4 to 5 breeds here. It's a little tough. A little tough when Mrs. done stepped out, you know. We talk about how to, it's just tough now. I mean, man, it's a little tough one. But let me say this. Let me say this, that to keep the relationship, you know, and to try to heal that wound, one of the things that make it hard is and I like to call it the trauma and how you found out. You know, if you found out by somebody else and that's so embarrassing, like that does something to a person, and that makes it like, do you ask yourself, do you ever heal from that? So it's like a trauma to find out. And as Brownie pointed to, you start to looking through phones and doing all these other things that become, you know, cynical toward the trust that was broken. You know, it becomes real hard. And for dudes, especially men, that when a woman, just say she stepped out on him, one of those traumas is, who was it with? Because if it was his homeboy or his brother or somebody, you know what I mean? That's like a double whammy. You know, like, how can you come back from that, man? You know what I mean? It's just tough. And I'm saying, as Doc said, you got to go see Doc about a good year straight.
Therapy,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you got to, Doc, let me go on and throw down these 3-4 stacks right here. Because my child, you know what I mean? I'm 4 stacks, you know what I'm saying?
Don't undersell what he does.
Man, look, dog, you know. But it's still one of them things, though, man. Like, it becomes a choice to say, I want to make this right. You know what I mean? You'd love my life. You know, hey, you know, we start communicating. Maybe it was some things I was working too much. You know, I wasn't there, as Brownie talked about. I had absence, and that's what led to dudes sliding in. But it's still that part of that, how you build up that trust back again. It is possible. And I implore people and salute people who do work through that, because as Doc also pointed to, it becomes a stronger bond. You start looking at the genesis of how it happened and then moving forward, and then continue to work on that trauma that was in it, be it that, you know, if you say it was the phone and all this other stuff, all those things like that. But it is one of those things that for people and women and men who may have been through this and maybe going through it now, it is possible to overcome it. It's going to take some help. Don't look at it in and of yourself. Get some good counsel to really make sure that you can talk out those problems and the problems that resulted from those problems to kind of start to mend things together. But we alluded to it in the early part of the show, though, you know, don't fall silent and ignore some issues that were already kind of presenting themselves on the front end. You know, sometimes that can be relevant before you even get married, and take it that level of commitment that you saw the signs and yet still you ignored them because, hey, you wanted something or you were lusting for something that, you know, you just say, hey, let me just get this. The pros outweigh the cons. And some people they just go along with it. You know, I've seen people who know that their person who is a habitual cheater, but yet still they subscribe to the notion that 50% of man is better than no percent of a man. Yeah. Bad as that sounds, that's what it is. That's how they roll. So, but that faithfulness part, man, like I said, it's one of those things that it's something that could be inbred in person, and seeing what they really want and what those things outweigh. And that's part of, you know, as our human species, man, we just gotta, you know, kind of go roll with the punches, keep things moving.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about paying attention to red flags, and also a lot about the fact that relationships are work, you know, whether or not there's cheating going on or not, you know, because whatever it is you have that you love, that you value, you put in the work to make it the best that it can be. Brownie, we really want to thank you for being on our show today. Now, we can't go without giving you the opportunity to talk about where people can catch up with you. Again, I mean, your podcast is shooting like a lightning. Talk about how people can hear it and what other things you have going on.
Yeah, well, if you're wanting to definitely keep in contact with me to get some more encouragement, you can definitely do so. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, especially Instagram and Facebook. My handle is the letter U, the letter R, singled out. The letter U, the letter R, singled out. And of course, my website, you can get the whole shebang. It's You Are Singled Out, all the way spelled out, YOUARE, singled out. And my latest book you were mentioning, since we've been talking about commitment left and right. So some people that may be tuning in who are single, some people who are in relationships prior to marriage, boom, check this book out, Confidence Before Commitment. Hopefully you can see it. It's on Amazon. And it's all about really, it's more so geared toward women. So some women listeners out there, you queens, super chicks, and Wonder Women, make sure you check out the book. It's going to definitely help to get you to a state of wholeness. A chapter is totally dedicated to red flags, so watch out for in relationships. And sex to purpose. It's just a whole lot in the pot inside of the book. So,
all that.
Yeah.
Need that.
They can pick up the books through the website and through your
and on Amazon.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On Amazon. Okay.
On Amazon too.
Well, we appreciate
Yes.
you so much for joining us today. Doc, any parting words? And then Orlando.
No, I would just say be true to yourself. Let it start there. See relationships through the honesty of seeing yourself. Like I said before, the goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. So if you're committed to making progress every day and you're doing that in a selfish way, not a self-centered way, because the selfish way allows you to be selfless, then you have a higher probability of attaining that goal.
That's great. And then what about our street therapist, Orlando? What you talk to us?
Yeah, man. Like just definitely don't underestimate the other person in the relationship and their feelings. You know, address those things of that lust. You know, if there's certain things that you feel that, man, I've always wanted to do this, make sure your partner, you know what I mean, communicate that, you know, because sometimes a good understanding partner will try to appease as best they can with that, so that doesn't become a problem, and then it festers, and then, you know, you start looking at other opportunities. But a lot of the best successful relationships, that communication, as we talk about, but don't be ashamed of saying like, yeah, I've always wanted to try that, because that newness keeps the relationship fresh and keep that faithfulness that stays together, keeping everything in there. But like I say, you just got to have an understanding, man. And for those guys who are out there, man, who struggle with that and saying, man, it's just so many out there, you women so plentiful, man, it's hard to be staying committed. Because that's real thing, man. I know some single dudes, man, they ain't think about getting married or being committed. And it's sad that because there's so, as I said before in the early part of the show, because the opportunity is there, that they actually use a form of a counterfeit relationship to appease the females in their life. And I say females plural, because they all think that they're in a relationship with this dude, but he has no thing to being in a relationship, because it's so much for him. But at some point he will settle down, you know, and I'd say that, you know, it just cross the breed, but it's just all about them. They will eventually settle down. But just, you know, make sure that if you picking that thing up from this guy and you want more, you know, have that talk with him or cut ties and see you later. And there's another one out there that will treasure you and appreciate who you are and what you are. It may not come in the package that you may think it is, but, you know, he'll definitely be true to the game and will not cheat on you if you had enough harm in your life where you say, you know, I don't want to go through that again. There's a lot of faithful brothers out there that don't do that. So.
A lot of valuable information today, you all. I want to remind our listeners that they can check us out or catch up with us on Facebook at MANBREED Live and on Instagram at MANBREED. This has been a great conversation about lust and faithfulness, and we want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of MANBREED Live, where we believe that to understand a man is to acknowledge